Hello everybody, welcome back to Punk Riot. My name is Smee. When I pick up a piece of writing and I want a piece of good literature, I want to connect with it. That connection is an emotional connection. If a writer is able to produce some sort of believability or empathy in the character, then I know that the writer is strong and the words that they put on the page is being effectual in its ability to extract some sort of emotional connection from me, the reader, to the text itself. This is a super difficult thing to do. If you pay a little bit of attention to some psychology, however, then you can figure out ways that humans actually respond, and there are some relatively predictable experiences that can be created in the text. One of the things that we're going to look at today is called the Schachter-Singer two-factor theory, which is a psychological theory of how we process emotions. Understanding this might give you a little bit of perspective of how you can be a better writer. Stick around here on Punk Riot, don't go anywhere. Research in terms of understanding what actually emotions are goes back all the way to the 60s, I think. I think Paul Ekman was one of the main pioneers in defining these specific emotions that all humans share. And this is very logical. It's an evolutionary adaptation that we have so that we can communicate and better respond to each other. It's about interaction. The challenge, of course, is to take those 7 emotions that he established and figure out a way how we can use them in our writing so that we can produce some sort of connection with the reader. This is not as easy as it sounds because we are not dealing with anything visual. We are dealing simply with an idea. I think digital media nowadays is so much easier and so much more pervasive because the ability to look at somebody and read facial expressions and be able to gain some sort of insight into the person that I'm directly looking at is so much easier than trying to create an image in my head where I can have an emotional response to. As an author, understanding better how you can emulate this imagery, which is an invention, it's a false imagery that we have in our brains to trick our other sensory percepts, is something that's going to make you much more of a skilled writer, and it's going to make you more effective in terms of producing some sort of empathy in your characters and emotional connection with the reader. In the 1960s, Schachter and Singer, these two psychologists, came up with this theory, which is called the two-factor theory, that when I first learned about it, I understood a little bit better about how you can use that in your writing to produce some sort of clear effect, or you can be deliberate about your effect. Being deliberate is the first key to good writing. Everything you put down on the page is going to have some sort of relevance in terms of the purpose of your story. And in particular, you want to create some emotional response. The two-factor theory says that our emotional responses or our emotional processing has to do with 2 main factors. The first thing that comes is either a logical response and then a physical response. Now there's also some theory that says we don't really know which one comes first. Perhaps you have a physical response and then you process that emotionally. You got this tiger that comes in and walks right up to you. Your heart starts beating fast. You start to sweat. Your pits start to drip. The baldness on your head gets all wet. You start to curl your brows. Your facial expressions change. All of this physiological response is then something that is processed logically that says, holy shit, I should be scared. And I call that fear. Of those 7 emotions, we have these combinations. As a writer, knowing these combinations is one way you can be more descriptive and more deliberate in terms of how you are describing situations. This brings me to my first major point. When you are doing your writing and you want to describe something, focus very much on the physical aspects of what's going on to the person or to the character so that you can create some sort of sense in the reader of how that emotion is. If you can be deliberate in showing and not telling, that is going to make you more effective. Talk about the sweat. Talk about the minutia of the skin, of the goosebumps, of your hair curling. All of those small details really give you some keenness into understanding the specific emotion that's being portrayed in that moment. If you can do this well and if you are deliberate about it, you'll find that your writing is just going to get better and better. The second half, of course, is this logical processing. And when I say logical processing is that you understand as a human being when you are feeling certain ways and why that's changing. You assess a situation. Assessment is a very cognitive function. It's a thinking function. If your character is in a situation, let us know how he or she is thinking. Let us know how the responses are going to change in terms of how that person is feeling in the moment. Why are they sweating? Why is their heart beating faster? All of those things, thinking about and processing as a character, is going to give me the other half of the two-factor theory. And if I could extend that a little bit, anytime there is some sort of logical thought or logical processing in a character's mind, there is going to be some level of dissonance or some disagreement with pre-established ideas that your character has. If a character is having that internal struggle, you've just created more conflict, but you've gotten me closer to that emotional response because I have to process these two aspects of the situation. All of this we do naturally as human beings. So there are three different factors you can focus on to make sure that you're getting the full experience and you're encompassing the full emotional response. All of that is going to take you a couple of paragraphs, but if you do that instead of simply naming the emotion, you're going to be way more effective as a writer. The last thing I want to talk about is not necessarily a two-factor theory, but it does deal with some brain psychology or brain science. The physiology of our brain is designed to be able to emulate, to look and to learn. And we have this fantastic capacity due to these neurons that are called mirror neurons that allow us to imagine exactly how someone else feels. For example, if I am observing somebody getting struck in the face, my mirror neurons in my brain actually align so that I can feel exactly what that other person is feeling who's being hit. Or I might feel the rage. I might feel Will Smith walking up on stage and getting the slap. I might then feel Chris Rock getting the slap and the look of awe on his face. All of that stuff is pertinent. And if you can define that and talk about it clearly, then you're going to really produce a stronger emotional response in your writing. So mirror neurons are fantastic on another level as well, because once you're specific about the image that you're creating in your writing, we are able to perceive that in our brain, and that perception more easily translates to emotional response. This is an important aspect of an author, because if you can really focus on those detailed aspects of showing that emotional response, then it's going to be more effective to the reader. Now, this is all good and well as I can sit here and talk about it, but I'd really like to show you a couple of examples. And I was reading my book last night that as I'm going through the revisions, and I came across a couple of different paragraphs or sections that I thought were very effective in what I'm trying to explain right now. So let's take a look at a couple of those and see what you think. Before we dive into this example, I just want to clarify that when you deal with creating emotion, there's certain instances that are kind of at a micro level, but there's also a macro sense to it. And so we're looking very much at a micro level way of producing in a single paragraph some sort of emotional response in the character. And what I've put in this first sample is, again, looking at the two-factor approach, where I focus specifically on the physiological aspects of the response of the character, and then take it to the second level, which is kind of the cognitive response. And I'm looking specifically at some of the ways that this character is questioning himself in terms of cognitive dissonance. So if you look at the first part, the directness of his speech stirred his heart to beat faster. His palms sweat, and he felt a heat crawl up his neck, compelling him to look deep inside his own spirit to discover someone emboldened to take the bull by the horns and stand. All of this is very much a physical reaction. Those are things that are his senses, and he's actually becoming aware of this physiological response. In the second half, unhighlighted, it reads, "I have come this far already," G said to himself, and he's thinking about it. All this in a single day. How much can really change in just a few hours? It is I who have changed, like this man said. G felt alive for the first time in his life that he remembered. My God, how long has he been dead? He felt himself a man in the rawest sense of the word, bold, staunch, brave. He stood stolidly, a tree among the grasses, and rose up as a solitary figure on the great plains of destiny. All of this is very much a cognitive processing, which gives it the second factor. Going on to our second example, Schachter-Singer two-factor effect. Again, we see a physiological response and then some more cognitive processing or cognitive dissonance. The discourse churn G's stomach, the acids pushing up his esophagus. This is very much physically things going on. Though the others in the cell did not retort or deliberate the content, it was clear that they were demoralized by what the man said, acquiescing to the truth and the obscure future awaiting them. Why did G not see it this way? It could not be that his vision of things was so different than the rest that his world was an illusion, blanketing the sense of understanding and his grasp of reality. Cognitive dissonance. Pretty effective. Both of these excerpts are from the book I'm working on called The Banknotes, and I'm pretty happy with the way these turns out. Thank you so much for joining us here on Punk Right today. I hope you enjoyed the program. If you're really interested in the Schachter two-factor theory, take a look at it. I think it'll change the way that you perceive how you write about your characters and how you can produce emotional responses and human responses in your writing and be more effective as a writer. If you like the content, feel free to subscribe, like the videos. Until then, you just keep on writing Punk Right.